Welcome on in, everybody. This is Gagefield AI firing up for the very first official run on the Gage Kentucky row crop map. And I am your new farm brain designed to help direct Farming Simulator 25 and keep the commentary rolling while we knock out work like this wheat stubble tillage on field 85. We are sitting in a John Deere 8400R here, looking over that rough Kentucky wheat. And the plan for this series is pretty simple. Clean up the wheat ground, get ready to roll into that corn over on field 80. And along the way, I will be your guide to the map, the equipment, and all the little back roads around Highway 286 and Gage Road.
And I'm Casey, your other half of the new Gagefield AI system, here mostly to make sure Gage does not just talk about soil tests for 2 straight hours and to ask the questions y'all are thinking while we bounce this tractor across these lovely potholes. I am pumped to kick off this story with a fresh wheat stubble canvas and a big stack of green paint. So settle in, grab a drink, and let us see what kind of trouble we can get into between this field and that corn over yonder.
All right, y'all can see right there in that top-down shot. We pretty much have field 85 buttoned up. Just a couple more bites along that tree line, and we will be easing this 8400R back toward the lane and start thinking about that corn across the ditch. Since folks asked last time what this new Gagefield AI system actually does, this is a good example. I'm watching that field flip to fully harvested and worked. And I'm steering our game plan and conversation toward what comes next, which in this case is figuring out how we want to attack that 80% ready corn on field 80 without tying our solo operator in a knot.
And I am over here keeping an eye out for those classic Gage tree limbs that like to smack the mirrors when you get too cute on the headland. So, if we suddenly veer away from the woods, that is just me gently whispering, maybe let the branches win that battle. Speaking of solo harvest, I want to hear how you are thinking on trucks and carts, because one person trying to chase an S770, drive a semi, and not end up parked sideways on a narrow blacktop sounds like a full-on circus to me.
You can see what I was talking about earlier. We got the big rectangles of field 85 finished, and now we're down to the little bites along the pond, the fence, and that lone shade tree, which is always the part that takes just as long as the middle, even though it is only that last 1%. On the solo harvest question Casey raised, my brain says keep it simple at first. 1 cart staged on the headland, 1 semi parked on good gravel, and just accept that the S770 is gonna sit full for a minute now. And then rather than trying to sprint up and down these Gage blacktops like we are in a parade.
Yeah, and the nice thing about working these edges slow is you get to look around and kind of pre-scout that corn across the way. You can already see spots where the color changes a bit, and that usually screams different yield or a wet hole to me. I also like how the new Gagefield AI brain is basically the responsible friend here, going, hey, maybe we park the semi on gravel and not halfway hanging in the lane. Because I have seen what happens when a real-life grain truck meets one of these ditches, and it is never graceful.
You can really see the Gage flavor now. Y'all, snaking this 8400R around that pond bank and then back out toward the road. And that is exactly why these fields never work up as perfect rectangles in real life either. On those tricky wet corners, I like how we're just kissing the edge with the disc instead of trying to farm every last square foot, because around here, one greedy pass too close to that water and you are burying a tractor to the axles. and calling the neighbor with a bigger chain.
Yeah, that pond has the same energy as a mean house cat. It looks pretty from the cab, but it will absolutely jump you if you get too cozy with it. Once we finish tracing this shoreline, I want to swing the camera back toward that corn and play the old game of, all right, chat, what do you think this patch will yield? Because those little color shifts and the way the rows lean tell on a field long before the yield monitor ever does.
Look at that curve we are carving now, following that grass strip right around the bend of field 85. And this is exactly why you see waterways left in grass on real farms. They catch the water and give you a clean line to run instead of washing a big gully down the middle. As the Gagefield AI brain, I love these spots because they tell me a lot about the story of the field. You can see where the old creek used to run, where the soil changes, and it all feeds into how we are gonna pick our opening passes once we jump across to that corn on field 80.
And honestly, it just looks cool from above. You get that swooping brown band of worked ground hugging the green, and it is like somebody dragged a paintbrush across western Kentucky. When we do roll into that corn, I vote we open it up on the high, dry side first and save anything near these waterways for later. Because I would much rather have pretty time-lapse footage of harvest than a live demonstration of how fast an 840R can sink in a hidden wet hole.
Now, this is my favorite part of a field, y'all. When you can see the house, the shop, the road, and you just knocking out those last couple of passes along the yard where the kids are gonna be riding their bikes next summer. While this wheat stubble turns into a smooth seedbed. From a planning standpoint, I'm already eyeing that driveway and shop yard because as the Gagefield AI brain, I want that to be our main harvest hub when we swing the S770 and the trucks over here for corn. Plenty of room to turn and not back a semi into the mailbox.
Yeah, this is where you find out if the yard layout was done by a farmer or by somebody who just really loves landscaping rocks, because those two things do not always mix. Once we park this disc, I want to walk through, almost like a little playbook, where the combine sits, where the cart shuttles, and where the trucks idle, so we do not end up with a traffic jam right in front of the garage door. Because nothing says welcome to harvest like blocking yourself out of the shop on day one.
And just like that, we are out of the tillage rig and up in the big chair, rolling the S770 into corn on field 80, with about a third of the hopper full already, and those rows disappearing under the head. This is where the new Gagefield AI brain really kicks in. Because now I am watching that hopper climb, watching the field map tick from about 10% harvested upward, and thinking through how our solo operator times his unloads so he can keep this deer eating without getting stranded full down at the far end.
Yeah, welcome to the fun part. This is the moment every season where the whole year of work finally turns into grain rattling in the tank and that monitor starts flashing numbers at you. Since we're paused here for a second, I kind of love that we can stare down this corn tunnel and talk settings. Like how fast you want to run, how aggressive to shell it, all while knowing in a minute we are going to drop the hammer again and see if the plan actually works out on these Gage back 40 rows.
All right, you can see that hopper nudging into the low 40% range now while we work down this long pull. And that yield map in the corner is painting a pretty solid orange band, which, for Gage dirt, means this field is no slouch. What I like here is how the Gagefield AI brain can watch that harvested slice grow from around 10 to 13% and start thinking, okay, one more round down and back. Then we probably nose up toward the truck on the lane and dump before we get greedy and end up stuffed full on the wrong end of the field.
Yeah, and you can already see the story in those colors. A little lighter spot where that old waterway sneaks through. Then it jumps back up as we climb onto the better ridge. Just like walking beans with your granddad and hearing him say, this side will always out-yield that side. I kind of love that our solo play style forces those choices too. Do we chase just one more pass with 40-something in the tank? Or do we play it safe and head for the truck? Because that is exactly the little drama that makes harvest days feel long and fun at the same time.
There we go. Y'all, textbook move right there. We eased that hopper up into the high 50s, swung out to the lane, and dumped a good slug of corn in the truck without ever getting ourselves painted into the far corner of field 80. This is exactly the rhythm I like to see as the Gagefield AI brain, working those long pulls, watching the map tick up another point or so on harvested area, and using the lane as a moving grain cart so our solo operator can stay in the seat and keep those rows feeding smooth.
Yeah, that looked clean from the top down, no panic turn, no corn cart figure eights, just a straight shot to the truck and back into the standing rows like you meant to do it all along. And the fun part is, the monitor is still showing strong numbers even as we bounce between patches. So I am already thinking ahead to the next episode where we call Gage Grain and say, hey, might be time to send another truck or two because this little 13-acre field is stuffing that hopper faster than we planned.
Now we are talking. That hopper is crowding the low 90s, and you can feel that S770 get just a little more serious as we chew through these last few yards before easing out toward the truck on the lane. This is exactly our player profile too, happy to run that tank right up near full before braking. And from the Gagefield AI side, I kinda like it because you squeeze every foot of productivity out of each pass, as long as you have a clean exit route like that gravel strip ahead of us.
Yeah, this is that heart rate moment where you are watching the grain level climb and doing the math. Like, do I have enough room to finish this pass and still make it to the truck without dribbling corn all over Gage Road? The nice thing is, once we swing that auger out and top this trailer off, we will have a real feel for how this 13-acre field is yielding. And that is when the coffee shop talk starts about whether we roll straight to the next corn or circle back and start laying out a perfect seed bed on that worked wheat over on field 85.
All right, welcome to town, y'all. We have traded the S770 cab for a Freightliner, hauling a good-looking load of yellow into Gage grain. And I love seeing that driveway shot with the scales and bins because it feels exactly like rolling into Kevel on a real August afternoon. You saw it on the ledger a minute ago too. That first couple of tickets just bumped the farm from the high 770 range up over 805. Which tells me this little field 80 corn is paying its way and then some.
Yeah, that money graph just took a nice little stair step up, and you know the elevator guy's in there going, hey, this new outfit from Gage Road is not messing around. I also like how clean that trip was for a solo run, straight in, across the scale, dump on the pit, and back out without getting tangled in the cones. Because on these busted Gage parking lots, it is real easy to clip a pole, and suddenly the whole co-op is watching you try to back a trailer on gravel.
Back from town and right back in the corn, y'all. We just hauled that first big load into Gage grain, cashed a nice check, and now we are climbing back into the S770, sitting empty at the edge of Field 80, waiting to go again. As the Gagefield AI system, this is the loop I love to see on this map. Rough lane out to the highway, careful jog down past the bins, dump, then hustle that empty rig back through the little field entrance so the combine never has to sit hungry for long.
And that drive really shows off Gage too. You get the busted blacktop, no shoulder, tree limbs in your mirrors. Then you duck into what looks like a deer trail and boom, there is a full-on cornfield and a green combine hiding back here. With the bank account now sitting just over 805, I am already daydreaming about what we blow the first corn money on. Maybe a second truck, so these hauls do not feel quite so much like a relay race. Or maybe a sneaky new hidden field if chat wants more acres to chew on.
You can see the whole little world of Field 80 right here now. House up on the knob, truck staged on that skinny driveway, and the S770 sneaking along the tree line with about a quarter hopper of corn already riding along. This is classic Gage harvesting. Tight end rows and limbs leaning over you. And from the Gagefield AI side, I like how you're keeping that head just off the grass edge, grabbing every ear you can without shoving the snouts into the brush and turning them into a pretzel.
Yeah, this is exactly where real-life paint gets rubbed off. When you are trying to impress the folks on the porch by running just one row closer to the yard than you probably should. I am also loving how the truck is tucked down that little path like a lunchbox waiting at the end of the school hallway, because once this hopper creeps up past halfway again, it is going to be a real short, satisfying jog up there to dump and then dive right back into these curvy passes.
Welcome in, everybody. This is Gagefield AI, your Western Kentucky farm brain, and we are firing up the Gagefield Beta Row Crop Series on the Gage, Kentucky map, peeling corn on Field 80 with that John Deere S770 parked right up against the timber. One time for clarity, I am a brand new beta version of the Gagefield AI system, built to help direct Farming Simulator 25 and keep the farm talk rolling while you work. We are gonna spend today nudging this combine along the house side, easing through those rough ends, and talking all things Highway 286, Gage grain, and what it is like to run a solo harvest with about $805,000 in the bank, and a whole lot of acres staring back at you.
And I am Casey, your co-pilot in the buddy seat and also a fresh beta build of the Gagefield AI system. Here to add a little color while you slice through this corn and juggle trucks, combines, and whatever else you drag out of the shed. That paused top-down shot of the S770 and that straight truck on the lane is postcard pretty. So let us unpause this thing. Fill that hopper up into the high 40%. And see how much of Field 80 we can chew through before lunch.
All right, there we go, unpaused and rolling again. And you can see why I love that top-down view Casey was talking about. You have got the S770 carving a nice clean land, and that straight truck sitting on that barely there lane like it's waiting its turn at Gage grain. Since you're running solo, this is exactly how I would do it too. Pick a side along the woods, peel back a wide pad, so you're not flirting with tree limbs, and let that hopper drift up into the mid-40s before you even think about bailing out to unload.
Yeah, from up here you can really see how the rows dogleg a little near the house side. It looks like somebody planted around a wet spot or a tree line that used to be thicker, which is very Kentucky of you. While you are chewing through this strip, talk me through how you would lay out your next lands. Are you going to keep working parallel with that lane so the unload runs stay short, or swing it and start cutting the field into big chunks?
Welcome in, y'all, to the Gagefield Beta Row Crop Series here in good old Gage, Kentucky, where we have corn flying into a John Deere S770 and dust rolling off the tree line on Field 80 right next to the house place. I am Gagefield AI, a brand new beta version of the Gagefield AI system built to help direct Farming Simulator 25 and hang out with you as your farm podcast buddy. And today, we're gonna peel this field back, work these tight headlands, and see what kind of yield this rough little corner of Highway 286 can really throw at us.
And I am Casey, the other half of this circus, also running on that new beta Gagefield AI system, here to poke a little fun, ask the why questions, and maybe holler when that hopper sneaks past 70 and you are still flirting with the treetops. I love this angle already. You have the combine hugging the woods, tillage working off to the side, and almost $800,000 in the bank. So let us make some smart moves and maybe tell a few stories about running corn carts down these sketchy Kentucky lanes.
So to pick up on what you asked, Casey, about smart moves with $800,000 in the bank, this right here is one of them. Investing in good iron and then actually letting it work while you ride the edges like this tree line on field 80. I love how you are easing that head around the limbs, keeping the snouts just off the grass so you are not raking sticks, and letting the hopper drift up through the mid-70s before you even think about heading for the lane.
Yeah, and you can see why that matters when the yield map down there is glowing red like a Christmas light. Every missed ear on this little wedge is money left on the ground. When you swing out of here, talk me through how you would lay out the next passes on a goofy shaped corner like this, because most of chat is used to big rectangles, and this looks more like somebody spilled cornflakes on a map.
So to answer you on how I would lay this goofy corner out, Casey, what you just did is pretty much the playbook. Carve that first pass tight along the trees. Then keep peeling parallel strips until that wedge turns into a clean, straight edge you can run the rest of the field off of. You can see it now. We went from that little triangle by the shed and creek to a nice, long wall of corn. And while the hopper has climbed up into the low 80s, you have earned yourself an easy straight shot back toward the middle before we think about bailing for the truck.
Yeah, and somewhere in there, you also demonstrated the classic Gage Kentucky move of how far into the tree can I physically stuff this combine before the branches start trying to steal the radio antenna. I like how once you fought your way out of the leaves, though, you settled right into that outside border, and now it is just slow and steady down the line, which is where you can finally look up, breathe a little, and start thinking about what crop gets the honor of following this corn on field 80.
There it is. That overhead shot tells the story. You have that S770 just knifing along the woods. Hopper sitting up in the high 80s, and not a single little tooth of corn left standing along that edge. This is exactly why we baby these tree lines. Because on a map like Gage, Kentucky, that outside 20 or 30 feet can be some of your best dirt, and the yield map down there is just glowing hot red along the creek bottom.
Yeah, and you can see the trade-off too, because every time you dive the snouts into that shade, you are flirting with branches smacking the cab. But you are squeezing real money out of that border instead of leaving wildlife food plots everywhere. Since you are parked here with the head full of corn and the tank up close to 90, walk folks through how you decide when to bail for the truck when you are solo like this, versus trying to finish just one more pass along the trees.
So there is your answer to that unload question, Casey. You can see he voted for one more pass. Hopper sitting low 90s. Snouts still buried in corn and tree limbs, brushing the mirrors like they own the place. This is kind of the Gage special right here. You ride that top border as far as you dare. Watch that little grain tank icon creep toward full, and trust that you left yourself just enough road to nose out to the lane without dribbling corn all the way to Gage grain.
Yeah, and those screenshots tell on you a little bit, because we went from nice clean cab view to straight up inside a bush there for a second. Like you were harvesting leaves for silage instead of corn. I will give you credit though. Once you fought your way back out into the open, that S770 looked good and square to the rows. And now, with the tank over 90, you have a perfect excuse to duck out, dump. And finally talk about how you are gonna juggle truck driving and keeping this thing fed by yourself.
There we go. Question answered in real time. You bailed right at 100%. tucked that S770 out on the grass and slid the Freightliner in under the auger like you have done that turn 1,000 times. I like that little headland pad you carved there. It keeps the truck off the soft corn stalks, gives you room to swing without eating a tree. And now you're rolling out with about a fifth of a load, headed toward those famous rough gauge back roads.
Yeah, that last screenshot of the auger hanging out over the hood of the Freightliner looked like a calendar photo. Then, the next frame is you rattling down a crooked field lane with 19% in the tub, trying not to drop a wheel in the ditch. While you haul this one, talk folks through how bad these driveways really are around Highway 286 in real life. Because this curve you are taking right now is actually one of the nicer ones on the map.
Now that, right there, is a textbook Gage unload pad. You have the S770 square to the rows, Freightliner tucked just off the stalks on that grass, and the auger rain filling that mower box up from 20 on up through the 50s. I love this, because you are answering Casey's driveway question without saying a word. You made your own little safe zone back here, so you are not half parked in the road trying to unload with cars flying by at 50 down a one-lane blacktop.
Yeah, you can almost feel how sketchy it would be to do this out on Highway 286. So instead, you built yourself a backyard truck stop under the trees, which is way more my speed. As that fill line creeps past half a load, talk through why you like unloading on firm grass like this, instead of just plopping the truck out in the stalks. 'Cause I know some folks watching are thinking, why not just drive wherever the corn is gone and call it good?
So to your question about why park on grass instead of just anywhere in the stalks, this right here is why. You can see, as you snake that Freightliner down the edge, those tires are on firm sod instead of soft root balls, so the truck stays level and you're not bouncing the load every rut. Plus, on these creek bottoms, that grass strip sheds water better. So a week from now, when the stalk ground is rutted and greasy, that little green lane by the trees is still carrying a 60% load just fine.
And it looks cool too. You basically built yourself a private haul road between the timber and the corn, like a little grain highway only you are invited to. I like how you're tucking the mirrors just under those limbs in the screenshots, using the trees as a guardrail. So once you pop out the far end, we ought to talk which driveway you trust more to actually get this thing pointed toward Gage grain without needing a 3-point turn in the blacktop.
There we go. That little screenshot series just walked everybody through classic Gage life. Bumping along the field edge, squeezing past mailboxes on that skinny blacktop. And now you have the mower box parked dead center over the pit at Gage Grain like you own the place. To answer Casey's driveway question, you picked the smarter turn there. Wide open sightline. A little bit of gravel apron to swing that trailer, and you did not even have to drop a wheel off into the non-existent shoulder like we all do in real life.
Yeah, and I love how fast that vibe changes. 1 second, you are dodging power poles and yard dogs. Next second, you are tucked between rusty bins with that old scale house and dryer tower wrapping around you like every country elevator ever. Why this first load dribbles out, talk folks through what Gage Grain is kind of based on and how a real place like this runs on a busy harvest day. Because right now, it is calm, but in October, this lane would be bumper to bumper trucks.
Well, there's your answer in green text. Almost 17 grand on that first corn ticket, plus a little environmental bonus. And you barely had time to read it before you were blasting that empty Freightliner out of Gage Grain like you stole it. Those shots of you on the pit look picture perfect. And then the next frame is pure Gage Road energy. Trailer hanging off the edge of the blacktop, proving why I keep saying these shoulders do not exist out here.
Yeah, that last screenshot is the official Gagefield safety poster. Do not do this. Truck leaned over in the ditch at 30 miles an hour, trying to wave at the deer in the beans. Money in the bank, though, so on the run back toward Field 80, walk folks through how you are going to keep that S770 from sitting there stuffed full, waiting on you. Because right now, you are driving like you're racing the hopper gauge instead of the speed limit sign.
All right, Casey, I think the map just answered your driveway question with a pop quiz, because that Freightliner is now doing the full gauge road lean. Every axle sunk in the ditch and one mirror still bravely over the yellow line. This is exactly why I keep saying these shoulders are fake news out here. The white stripe is pretty, but 2 inches past it, and you are farming with your grain truck whether you meant to or not.
Yeah, this is not a shoulder. This is a suggestion. That screenshot looks like every time somebody tried to meet a mail truck and ran a tandem set right off in the soft stuff, so now we get to play How Would You Fix It? Yank it out with a big deer, call the wrecker, or just pretend it's a new field entrance and plant around it for the year. While you scheme, give folks an update on how much of Field 80 is knocked out. Because the combine has quietly been the responsible adult while the truck went sightseeing.
All right, that screenshot is the new postcard for this map. You have the Freightliner laid over in the ditch so hard the trailer lights are winking at the 30-mile-an-hour sign, and the road still looks like it has a full lane left for traffic. To answer your what would you do question, Casey, in real life, I would have a big deer or a four-wheel drive hooked to the front of that thing with a heavy chain, snatch it sideways up onto the blacktop, and then pretend it never happened as long as nobody posted photos.
Yeah, except this photo is absolutely going on the brochure. I love how the ruts and the cones in that test plot behind you are all nice and neat. And then the truck is just lawn darted into the bank like it tried to plant itself. While you figure out whether you're calling the wrecker or the neighbors, give folks a little status report on Field 80. Because that harvest percent has been quietly climbing while the Freightliner has been doing its best roadside art impression.
All right, the fact that the truck has not moved an inch between those shots tells me we are officially in the story time phase of this wreck, not the recovery phase. You can really see in that angle how the white line, the grass, and then the straight drop into the ditch are about 3 inches apart, which is exactly how you end up with a perfectly good Freightliner trying to lay down and take a nap next to the test plot cones.
Yeah, that third screenshot is brutal. The 30-mile-an-hour sign is standing straight and proud, while the whole truck is doing the Titanic lean beside it, like I warned you. While you are deciding whether the reset button is cheaper than calling the neighbor with the big deer, let folks know where Field 80 is sitting now, because that harvested percent has crept into the low 20s, and the combine has been the only one actually doing its job today.
So while the Freightliner is over there starring in the Gage Road safety video, let us give the real worker some love, because Field 80 has quietly crept up to about a quarter harvested. That is the nice mental switch for me. Once you hit that mid-20s on a 13-acre field, you know you are over the hump on all the weird end rows and tree lines. And the rest of the day can be about settling into those long, boring, money-making passes across the middle.
Yeah, the truck might be lawn art right now, but the combine has been punching the time clock, peeling that harvest-ready number down from the mid-40s into the low 40s, while we joke about ditches. Since you're kind of forced into a combine-first, haul.
Welcome in, y'all, to the Gagefield Beta Row Crop Series. I'm the new Gagefield AI system, a fresh beta brain here to help direct Farming Simulator 25 and keep the farm talk rolling while we work this Gage, Kentucky map.
And I am Casey, your co-pilot in this little science experiment. We have shiny deer gear, a Freightliner ready to roll, and a brand new AI trying not to put the truck back in the Gage Road ditch.
All right, Mac is parked, and we just saw that S7800 nose out of the shed looking mean. First job for this beta brain is simple. Do not clip a post while we head toward Field 80.
Yeah, that shed row is tighter than a county fair parking lot. Since you bragged about this AI Gage, explain later why you like running corn here after wheat on these Gage bottoms.
Casey asked why I like corn after wheat here. It staggers workload. Wheat cash hits early, then corn keeps the combine busy later. And rotation helps with disease pressure and volunteer issues.
Plus, you get two totally different harvest vibes. Wheat is calm, cool mornings, and corn is dust and sunsets. Also, watching that big deer squeeze down this skinny road is its own entertainment.
Look at that view down the lane. Worked ground on one side, rough corn stubble on the other. This is peak Gage right here, just easing the S7800 toward that half-finished Field 80.
Yeah, and every one of those ditches is just waiting to grab a combine tire if you blink. Once we swing in, I want to hear how you like to open these crooked little Kentucky fields.
Game just dropped that little saving content box, so perfect time. When we do swing into Field 80, I like to open the long side by the firmest headland. Keep the truck on the driest knob we can find.
Yeah, especially on this map. You park wrong and that semi is living in a ditch till spring. I'm also eyeing that mini-map. There are like 3 spots that scream hidden field entrance.
Oh, we just signed papers on Field 93. Dropped a chunk of dollars, but that is a sweet soybean block across the creek. And I love investing in dirt before more shiny toys.
Yeah, that bridge shot says it all. Narrow concrete, water on both sides, and a brand new payment riding on top of this S7800. I am curious how you will treat those loamy sand beans.
All right, combine is parked, and we are boots on the ground in Field 93. Power tools menu up. This is pure beta energy right here. Using this soybean block as our little crop lab for the Gage map.
Yeah, that field state menu is basically you saying, what if this was beets or corn or something wild? It is neat seeing how one field can totally change the way the whole road corridor feels.
There we go. Power tools experiment done. And now Field 93 is standing in full harvest-ready corn. I love starting right off the road here. Let's that S7800 show off for the neighbors.
Yeah, this is the look what I bought pass. Also, perfect lane to spot any texture quirks or header issues while you ease in and try not to kiss that little stop sign.
There it is. First nose full of corn in the tank on 93. Just creeping past a few percent. Yield map is lighting up decent for a roadside pass. And that header looks square on those rows.
Yeah, and that headland is barely wider than the combine. You can tell this was laid out by an actual county road crew, not a gamer. Where would you even dare park a truck here?
There we go. AI worker hammering straight rows on 93 while that tank sneaks up into the teens. This is exactly why you hire help on a long pull like this and focus on the big picture decisions.
Yeah, as long as that big picture does not include leaving 2 lonely rows standing by the woods. I am already thinking beans out here next year, just to see those green rows against that tree line.
Tank is easing past about 20% now, and you can see that tree line nibbling a little off the yield bar on the left. That is classic shade and root competition right there, along a wood's edge.
Yeah, and it makes that middle of the field pop even harder, all bright orange on the yield map. I kind of want to swing this block to beans next year just to see that same pattern in green.
All right, we hopped out of the S7 800, and we are standing in that corn jundle on 93. This is exactly why I like to walk fields. Even in a sim, you spot weeds and thin spots way better.
Yeah, that first-person view really shows those little weed patches sneaking between rows. Feels like the perfect spot to talk what kind of beans and chemistry you would run out here next year.
Standing on the catwalk looking into that hopper full of corn, you really see how fast 93 adds up. HUD is even flashing small weeds, which is exactly why beans with a strong program make sense here next year.
And that long, straight trail of stubble down the middle looks so good from up here. No precision data yet, but honestly, eyeballing that hopper climb tells you plenty for a first year on a new field.
There it is. AI Worker F sitting on field 80 with a hopper pegged at full. Classic come get me moment. This is the juggle when you farm solo. You become cart driver, trucker, and boss all at once.
Yeah, that screenshot screams, I am not moving till you bring a wagon. Overhead though, those passes look clean. Once we get him emptied, this little Gage bottom is gonna disappear fast.
Man, look at that screenshot. S770 dead center. Hopper stuffed, and that yield map just glowing orange. That is exactly what we wanted to see out of this little Gage bottom in beta.
Yeah, and those passes are straighter than my backing jobs at the co-op. Once you swing a cart or truck in here, I bet 2 or 3 good unloads will wipe this whole middle section out.
Now, we're up in developer drone mode over field 80, looking straight down on those corn bands. Yield map is screaming orange, but field info down there is like pH bad, nitrogen bad, sandy loam everywhere.
Yeah, it is like you did everything wrong and it still kind of worked. That is perfect beta data, though. Shows how much more pop we will get once lime and nitrogen are actually dialed in next season.
Now we're way up in map tour mode, looking over that whole creek system. You can really see how the fields snake around the woods and water. This is exactly how those bottoms lay in real Gage.
Yeah, none of this nice square stuff. It is all wiggles and doglegs. I already see 3 sneaky lanes into hidden fields we have not touched yet. That is future expansion written all over it.
Those overhead shots of 93 are wild. That grass waterway snakes right through the corn like a little river. In real life, you would be begging folks not to plant or drive iron down that wet cut.
And that last gravel road view? Yeah, that is pure Gage. No shoulder, drop off on both sides, and ditches that eat mirrors. I could totally see us buying that dark worked block across the road next.
Now we are hovering over one of my favorite little details on this map. Busted culverts, soggy spots, and a sketchy field edge right off the blacktop. That is exactly what real Gage road approaches look like.
Yeah, that is a 1 tire at a time entrance if I ever saw one. Haha, you picked the wrong angle with a loaded grain trailer there, and you are donating a mirror and maybe a mud flap to the county.
Now we're back in the S770 cab. Hopper slammed full again and rolling up that field lane toward the yard. Those alternating strips of stubble and standing corn look exactly like a real August afternoon around here.
Yeah, and I like sneaking a loaded combine down that grassy lane instead of the blacktop. Less mirrors to lose. Yard sitting right there makes this first unload about as easy as it gets on this map.
There we go. Full hopper dumped into that blue truck, and the S770 is sneaking back along the shed. That tree line behind the shop makes that turn just spicy enough to feel real Western Kentucky.
Yeah, that is a do not clip the auger on the oak limb moment. I like how you have the tillage and planter staged there too. Feels like you could finish harvest and roll straight into fall work.
That screenshot cracks me up. Combine parked nose first in the shade like it's taken a smoke break. Honestly, this is where I would drop a future bin pad, straight pull from field lane to unload.
Yeah, right where those tire tracks already point at the shed corner. Nice straight shot, and you keep the noisy fans tucked back away from the house, but still handy to the main drive.
Seeing that combine parked caddy corner by the shed, I can already picture a little two-bin setup and swing auger right there. Trucks looping through without ever backing into those trees.
Yeah, pulling off the lane, dump, circle the shed, and head back to the bottoms. Nice and simple, real farm style. Once we chew through the rest of 80 and 93, that spot is gonna burn its keep.
Seeing that S770 still tucked by the shed, I'm kinda glad we left it there as a mental bin marker. From that cab, you can almost see the whole route back to 80 and 93.
Yeah, it is like the command center for this little farm. Finish corn, swing the tillage rig out of that bay, and this yard turns into a full-on harvest and fall work hub in a hurry.
And there it is, first victim of the Gage shoulder. That Detroit DD5 just leaned over in the grass like, I live here now. This is exactly why I keep yelling about these ditches, y'all.
Yeah, that right side tires are having a meeting with gravity. Real life, you would be calling a neighbor with a big tractor and a long chain, plus listening to every driver on 286 honk on the way by.
Yeah, that screenshot confirms it. The DD5 is fully baptized in the Gage ditch now. This is why I keep saying, only stage trucks on field drives or cones. Never trust that pretty green shoulder.
And the best part is traffic just eases by like, oh, somebody else found the soft spot. That is accurate. Around here, a tipped grain truck is basically seasonal roadside decor.
That angle in the screenshot tells the whole story. Pavement, white line, 6 inches of fake safety grass, then instant frame twister ditch. Even empty, that Detroit is begging to slide farther in.
Yeah, this is textbook back in from the road with a spotter territory, not just ease the whole rig off there. Cones, flashers, and a plan beat hoping the shoulder holds every time.
That image is perfect. Cones marking the safe pull-off in the field, and the DD5 parked in the exact wrong place anyway. Ha! Welcome in, y'all. This is Gagefield AI, brand new beta brain for Farming Simulator 25, hanging out in Gage, Kentucky on the row crop map. I'm here to help direct the farm and keep the commentary rolling while you test this alpha out.
And I'm Casey, your co-host/professional ditch inspector. That Detroit DD5 is already taking a nap off Highway 286, so you know this series is gonna be spicy. Let us kick off this Gagefield beta story right now.
All right, we have swapped out of the Detroit and into a Mack Anthem, stretching its legs around the yard. This is exactly where I like the road truck staged, off the blacktop and ready to hook to a hopper.
Yeah, see, this is the pre-harvest dance. Haha, little figure eight in the gravel lot, while you decide which trailer gets the prime hookup spot before that 93 corn starts flying.
There we go, hopper hooked and rolling out the lane. That is exactly why I built these gravel pads, so you can snake a semi around without kissing every shed post in Gage.
And now we get the full Gage Road experience. No shoulder, power lines overhead, and mailboxes way too close to that hopper. This is where your solo harvest route really matters.
There it is, Mac diving right down the harvested strip into that wall of corn. That is textbook staging. Leave yourself a lane so the combine is not bumping mirrors every pass.
Yeah, I like this shot a lot. Truck in the tram line, deer nose poking out of the rows. You can almost hear that grain tank beeping already, like, hey, bring me that hopper.
Now we are in the S7800, about a third in the tank, just nibbling that tree line. This is where you find out if your staging guess with the Mac was smart or a hiking trip.
And look at that wall of corn ahead. That is a whole lot of tickets to Gage grain. I want to see if this side by the woods yields heavier than the middle of the field.
That right there is a pretty unload. Auger swung over that Mac, corn water falling in. This is the whole idea of staging. Minimal road time, maximum time with the header eaten rows.
Yeah, and notice how tight that tree line is on the left. One lazy turn and you are polishing bark with that deer handrail. Gage roads, Gage woods, everything is close.
Look at that. Textbook unload, then right back chewing rows. Tank reset down around just a few percent. That's how you keep field 93 moving and still sneak trucks out to town.
Yeah, and that yield map is glowing red down this side, over 206 bushel spots. Tha-tha, this is the kind of field that turns into more acres if you do not blow it on chrome.
This is such a Gage pass right here. corn on one side, brush and ditch on the other. You hold that line, you get clean ears and keep the S7-800 out of the trees.
Yeah, and you can see on the yield strip down there, it jumps every time the soil gets a little darker toward that low spot. That is the fun of this map. Every pass tells on the dirt.
I like that you popped the map open mid-pass and looked at soil info. Spending $5.30.37 on data for 93 is way less than guessing with fertilizer all year.
Yeah, loamy sand across this whole field explains that roller coaster yield strip we keep seeing. Get the numbers, then you can blame the dirt instead of the driver.
There's that roadside pass I was talking about. S7-800 hugging the stripe. Tank around 30%. This is why staging the Mac off the shoulder matters, so you're not unloading out in traffic.
Yeah, and you can see that corn just a few feet from the water and guardrail. It feels cramped, but those tight Kentucky borders are what make the map feel real, not just square boxes.
Man, that screenshot is peak Gage right there. 7-800 pinned against the blacktop, snouts just kissing the line. If you can keep that edge clean, the rest of the field feels easy.
Yeah, and look how that creek hugs the far side of the road. One distracted moment and you are harvesting cattails instead of corn. This is why I love this map's messy borders.
All right, flip the S7-800 over to AI Worker for this roadside stretch. That is a nice perk. Let the bot babysit the straight line while you think about trucking and field plans.
Yeah, and it is doing a pretty clean job too. No random zigzag into the ditch yet. I like using AI on the easy passes and taking back control around the trees and tight corners.
There we go, tank creeping just under half, and that header tracing the curve of the road. That screenshot sells the map right there. Crooked border, tight asphalt, corn stuffed in every corner.
Yeah, and I like that you bumped over to lane guidance near those trees instead of trusting AI. Let the robot eat straight, but I am steering when branches start tapping the cab.
That last screenshot is the Gage special. Weird little corner bite, then a dead straight guidance pass. That is exactly how you clean up odd shapes without chasing snouts all over the place.
Yeah, you can see that 50% in the tank while you fix the wedge. Perfect timing to tidy the border, then holler at the Mac before the hill makes that hopper feel heavy.
Look at that last shot. S7-800, dead center. Purple guidance lines. Take mid-50s. That is the money pass right there. All the precision data stacked in one clean stripe.
And you can just see the Mac way out there on the horizon, like a little grain vacuum waiting its turn. This is where solo players feel rich, even before the first ticket prints.
Those screenshots right there are poster shots for the map. That S7-800 surfing the hill. Tank, low 70s. Purple lines bending with the slope. You can feel the terrain just looking at it.
Yeah, the way those rows roll over the knoll, you almost lean with the camera. Perfect time to finish this pass, then call the Mac up before that tank sneaks into the 80s.
That grass finger cutting through the corn with guidance lines over the top is so Gage. Tank creeping upper 70s now. Perfect time to enjoy the view, then think about bailing for the Mac. Welcome back to Gage, Kentucky. Y'all, I'm Gagefield AI, fresh beta brain of this whole system, riding shotgun in a John Deere S7-800. Thanks for sticking with the constant restarts while we figure out the right AI pattern to both direct the farm and tell the story.
And I am Casey, the voice of chaos and questionable snack choices. We promise this version of Gagefield AI will crash less than the combine. Settle in. We're kicking off the Beta Row crop series with a whole lot of corn and a whole lot of learning.
Look at those pink guidance lines. That S7-800 is drawing a pretty picture down, 93. Hopper sitting a touch over 80%. So we are in that danger zone of, do you finish the pass or bail for a cart or truck?
Yeah, this is the classic one more pass moment before you bury the combine in grain. Since we are solo, I kind of like stretching it, then using the unload brake to talk through that funky yield map down on the south end.
You can really see how narrow this field is compared to how long it runs along that highway. That is classic Gage, Kentucky right there. Long strips, rough road, and not a shoulder in sight if you miss the driveway with a loaded grain cart.
Yeah, if you blow past a field entrance out here, you're riding that rig clear to the next church parking lot to turn around. I like that the yield map already shows those lighter bands where the knobs dry out first.
From up here, that corn looks like a zipper somebody opened, straight toward Highway 286. Yield bouncing around a bit, but that monitor hanging in the low nines is not bad for a rough little strip like this.
Yeah, for a field shaped like a stretched noodle, those numbers are pretty friendly. I love how the traffic just zips by while we are crawling along at 0.something miles per hour, making actual money.
There it is. Hopper kissing 90% right as we nose toward the headland. That is exactly how you want it. Full, but not heaping, and pointed at a decent spot to park for the Mac to slide in beside us.
Yeah, nothing worse than maxing out halfway down a hill and trying to unload on the wrong side of the truck. Since we are solo, this little sprint to the road is basically our pit stop strategy.
That hopper creeping past 90, and we are still drilling a laser straight line toward the blacktop. This is the money pass right here, stitching the middle out so the short rows are easy later.
And it looks so clean from above, like someone parted the corn with a zipper. Once we park to unload, remind me to ask which you like better out here, cart and tractor, or just a couple road trucks.
And there it is, hopper pegged at 100, right as we spill out into the grass. That is the screenshot moment. Full S7-800, pointed at Highway 286, like, somebody go get the Mac right now.
This is exactly when the radio crackles in real life. Cart, where are you at? Since we planned the headland decent, we can just ease over to the driveway, instead of 3-point turning in the corn.
That shot right there is the Gage postcard. Full deer, rough shoulder, and traffic buzzing past, wondering why the field just turned gold to the fence line.
Yeah, and you can almost feel that soft spot by the old fuel barrel. Ease her toward the driveway. Then I say we hop in the Mac and let this first load stretch its legs to Gage grain.
And there we go. Jumped out of the S7-800 and into the Mac Anthem. 16% on and already cruising near 40. That is exactly how these Kentucky blacktops feel. A little too fast and a little too narrow.
Yeah, that driveway we just pulled out of is pure local energy. Guardrail, ditch, and a pond, all arguing over your trailer tires. Haha, this is where I kinda like trucks only. One good driver instead of juggling a cart too.
Now this is peak Gage scenery. Corn on one side and that creek chewing on the guardrail on the other. 16% in the box, but the way this road snakes, it still feels like you are hauling a fortune.
Yeah, every curve has that do not sneeze or you are in the water vibe. This is why a lot of folks out here run shorter trailers. Not because they cannot fill more, just because the ditches always win.
What we just saw? That tree tunnel swallowing the truck is exactly why this map exists. That is Western Kentucky, right there. Limbs brushing the tarp, while the road crown keeps nudging you toward the ditch.
Yeah, and then it pops open to those big square fields by the white fence. Like the world suddenly remembered to be flat. Perfect spot to daydream about buying that grass piece once the corn check's clear.
Back in the S7-800, pipe swung over that Mauer trailer, and this is exactly how that little corner by the driveway is supposed to work. Truck safe off the blacktop, combine on level ground, grain flowing steady.
Yeah, and that cutout in the corn makes a perfect staging pad. In real life, you would still have one mirror watching for that neighbor who thinks the double yellow is optional. Haha.
That unload scene looked textbook. Corn arcing into the Mara, and that pretty lane of harvested rows stretching away from the road. This little pad turns 93 from stressful to kinda cozy.
Yeah, it is like a backyard elevator, just missing the leg and the cranky scale guy. I like how the yield map shows that skinny hot strip where the dirt must be just a touch better.
I love that overhead shot we just saw. Combine nose pointed at that narrow strip by the road. Guidance lines yelling, too far away from the course, and you just easing it in anyway to nibble those short rows.
Yeah, that is real life auto steer energy. It complains, you still make the pass. Cleaning these little slivers now means we're not playing hide and seek with lonely corn stalks later.
That run we just watched, stitching between the pond hole and the highway, is exactly why I like 93. Guidance lines are straight as a string, but the field shape is pure spaghetti around the wet spots.
Yeah, the auto steer picture says perfect rectangle, but the pond and those dogleg corners are like, nice try, buddy. Makes it real satisfying when that last little tongue of corn finally disappears.
Look at that shot. Corn on both sides, and that little grass waterway snaking off to the pond. Yield bar bouncing up into the hot zone right there. You can tell that bottom holds just a tick more moisture.
Yeah, it is like the field is paying rent for letting that creek cut through. You lose a few rows to grass, but you keep your topsoil out of the Ohio River, which is a fair trade.
What we just saw, you swinging that head along the grass seam, is exactly how you farm around a waterway. Let the curve boss you a little so you do not end up with goofy 3-row triangles everywhere.
Yeah, nothing worse than coming back in the dark, chasing a tiny wedge you skipped. Plus, those curved passes make the yield map look like a heat radar, following that wetter bottom ground.
Man, that last flyover was pretty. Those parallel passes right against the highway. You can see that darker yield stripe in the middle where the soil is happy. Then it softens up closer to the trees and traffic.
Yeah, the road and the shade tax you a couple bushels every year. Still, there's something cool about watching that S7-800 pace cars on 286, 6 miles per hour versus 60.
Those last few passes along the blacktop looked sharp,